So Corey had been working on preparing us for an upcoming Coastal Caucus presentation that's been delayed. Every single board member was willing and wanted to participate in these outreach sessions, which is awesome. We had decided that myself and Karina would take the first one with the Coastal Caucus, and that as we get the other legislative committees hopefully online, that would be when we'd reach out to the other board members. So if you haven't heard anything as a board member, that is why. And also Shannon is going to give us an update on, or just let us know what the status is on our fundraising. So with that, I'll turn it over to Corey and Shannon.
Perfect, thank you. I have a couple of slides I'm going to put up here, so I'll transition to that in just a moment. What I have today, I think we'll keep it short, maybe no more than 15 minutes, and then if you have any questions, let us know. But yeah, general update on the status of things for communications, legislative engagement, and then Shannon will share the fundraising piece. So bear with me here. I'm working with one laptop screen, so you might see some fun things on my screen for a moment as we do a transition.
And Corey, I just made you the presenter.
Thank you. GoToMeetings is thinking about it. I'll try again, Lisa, but I did just get a notice that I am unable to share screen from GoTo.
Nope, it's coming. Give it a sec.
Okay.
There you go. We can see it.
Okay, great. Do you see it in presenter mode now too?
Yep.
Good. Okay, so just an FYI, I can't see any of you at the moment as I'm in presenter, so if you need something, holler. Okay, so as I jump into this, just a quick reminder, your communications and fundraising team it's 4 of us. So Nicole Schmidt with Sprout Partners, Kayla Anderson, who was here a little bit earlier listening in on some of the presentations. She's with Riparian Media. Myself, Corey Archer, and Shannon Brown were with True Wind Collaborative. So all together, we make up that communications, legislative engagement, and fundraising piece. Okay, just a quick status update for you in terms of where we're sitting on some of the deliverables and things that we've been working on. I'm actually going to start with what's on the right-hand side here in the completed column, because the couple of new things that we've wrapped up in the past couple of months since the last time that I came in front and shared an update with you all. We have a 4-pager available now that's used for legislative briefings. It does I'll show you on the next slide, I think here too, what that looks like. And then the fundraising plan is also complete. So just a couple of things that are out there now. As Laura mentioned, things that we've been really focusing on in the recent short term here has been getting ready for legislative presentations. I shouldn't have it as work sessions in there. It's really informational presentations about who is the OOST, where's that value, where are your priorities looking, and then some of what that funding ask is looking like as well, looking into the next couple of years here. So the Coastal Caucus presentation, we're on the agenda for November 7th, which is great. And then there are a couple of other leads in the works too. I think there was another committee that we have an optional presentation around December timeframe. So working on nailing that down. So to accompany that legislative briefing document that highlights more that big picture type of information, we're also putting something together that's more about, well, what about the good work that OOST has been funding so far, and what are some of the key successes coming out of that? As another communication piece that can really show how you've been leveraging investment so far, how you've been good stewards of those monies that you've received from Oregon legislature. Things that we haven't quite done yet, but we'll be ready to do when the opportunity is right, as a press release about OOST, and then social media posts have been ongoing. So some, maybe all of you have seen what this 4-pager looks like, the one that I mentioned earlier for the legislative briefing information, but lots of really good content in this. So if you see this and you're like, I would love to have access to that to be able to use in any other forums, let Lisa know. She can connect you with this one. And then I remember at the last board meeting, we talked about, well, where's the place that's the hub? Where can you get resources or have access to these type of communication materials? So we have made, in partnership with Lisa, lots of updates to the website, the OOST website. One of those places is this resources page, and we're working with Lisa on adding in additional links in there. So resources for board members, things like You can go there to get the link to the one-pagers that are being developed. We put together template PowerPoint slides that hits on some of those key what's the OOST type of information that you might want to have access to embed into your own presentations if you're ever talking about the OOST in different forums. So that's where that is going to live and will continue to evolve over time. I'm not going to spend too much time during this update here in terms of how the social media numbers are shaping up, but I just wanted to quickly run through that there has been continued engagement as Kayla from the social media communications team has been managing, and the trends that we're seeing is generally increasing followers and engagement over time. So this is really positive. It's an organic type of growth. We're not doing any advertising of the social media accounts for OOST. It's really just about that organic engagement. So this is what we expect to see. And I want to re-encourage you that the things that you can do to help expand that exposure is if you're involved on LinkedIn, for example, if there's something that you were involved in or you'd like to highlight, go ahead and share that or tag the OOST in whatever forums you participate in. So as we've been launching these communication efforts, things like really updating that website content, which is good for what's called search engine optimization. As we've been doing that organic social media content, lots and lots more visitation to the website, which is great. People are Googling Oregon Ocean Science Trust and finding the website that way. They're following links directly that we're putting out there into the world. A couple of other sources as well that are bringing some traffic to the OOST. So you're getting lots of attention. I'm going to pause for a quick moment before I transition to Shannon, just to take any questions. And again, I can't see you right now, so Lisa, if you could help flag if there are any hands up, that kind of thing, that'd be great. But it might be best to just answer any questions related to the communications and legislative engagement side while it's fresh.
No questions here. Yeah, I mean, you've done a great job of just keeping us engaged throughout. So I feel like we're all pretty much up to speed on where we're at and how we got there. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Well then, Shannon, I will hand it off to you and you just let me know when you want your next slide and I'll keep driving.
All right. Well, thank you again for having us here today to kind of provide an update on where we've been and where we're going. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide there, Corey. So let's see, last time we all met, we kind of talked through a fundraising plan that included kind of those three prongs about kind of our legislative goals, our individual donation goals, and then that larger piece about the government funding. And it's just so great to hear about your continued strengthening of your partnership with the California Ocean Science Trust and how that might come to fruition through individual like foundation grants and also through government funding opportunities. I also worked through a list of foundations you all had flagged as potential opportunities to find funds and have a tracker that we've been kind of evaluating. We did submit one grant to the Campbell Foundation, and we should be probably hearing back about that sometime here in October. So we'll stay tuned for that. And we had just a very short list of a few other foundations that had open grants or Laura had a few personal relationships that we drafted some messaging and reached out to them. So go ahead and go to the next slide there, Corey. I don't have a ton to update on, except for that kind of the last piece that I left you with was just one of the real kind of opportunities that the Oregon Ocean Science Trust has is just beginning to develop those lists, both small donors and large donor opportunities. And I just was curious how people were going about kind of writing down those names, if we had anybody that we were kind of looking at moving through the cultivation process from the board.
The board is all hanging their head.
We're all going.
We're all going, I haven't really.
Yeah, and I think I'll just say that this is actually a pretty good time to be cultivating kind of those relationships, because we're kind of coming into what is known as year-end giving, where a lot of people are looking to make donations of various amounts. And so I look forward to kind of looking ahead about what that might look like for the OOST at any level. And there's also an opportunity to review the foundation tracker or pursue other opportunities for foundations. But I do think that your partnership with the California Ocean Science Trust is going to be potentially really a great opportunity, and offer my communications framing and any kind of partnership opportunities and what that might look like for foundation opportunities. And I also am really looking forward to the next agenda item too, hearing from the Oregon Cultural Trust about how their organization is set up and what that might mean in how we can also kind of approach where we're at in our unique position of just kind of we're needing to also just spread awareness about the OOST. That's kind of step one in where we're at in our process, and that takes time. So just hearing about where they're at in theirs as being several years ahead of us. Representative Gomberg, I see you have your hand up there. Can I?
I do. Thank you, Shannon. I heard you use the phrase "at any level." Realistically speaking, what kind of contribution ranges are you anticipating from the people you want us to go and help solicit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think just based on the kind of numbers that we were trying to look at one point we were saying, $500,000. This is mostly in general support and capacity building that we're looking at developing the organizational infrastructure. So we were thinking gifts with a comma. So over $1,000 would be a good place to start. Anybody who's, mission aligned, ocean interested, and also has the ability to give. We can set up a framework of how we might talk to and cultivate those donors into being able to write those checks. Obviously, we're not going to just come right out of the gate and say, hey, can you write us a check? But developing materials, developing the resources to kind of get that person or those entities in a place where that's a really easy ask would be the next step. Any other thoughts?
Yes, Karina.
Karina.
And Kristen,
All right,
both
we'll vote.
fighting for.
No, we just both put our hands up. I guess one thing that would be good for us to do, and you were talking about the framework for the ask and sort of like what we're asking for, and I know we need capacity. It's not the most attractive ask. I feel like we need a more a pitch for something. What's going to be the return on that investment for a donor? What are we going to accomplish?
I have a thought on that.
So I'd like to maybe just figure out what's a target area that we want to build.
I have a quick response to that, and then we'll get to Kristen. But I too was struggling with that because it's like to go to a donor and say fund nursery, it's like a big deal. But this concept that we're trying to perhaps move towards pulling together a convening or a summit to have an ocean research agenda is going to cost some money. Going to the Hill to do this federal engagement is going to cost some money. And the return is we want to bring back more commas, like many more zeros than what you're putting in. And so if we had even $50,000, wherein a $500 donation could be a chunk of that, but if we had $50,000 to do what we did for the science summit, but do it in a policy way, that could be really cool. That's my idea on that. Kristen?
I was just questions. I wasn't at the last meeting. I missed it. So I didn't know is there like a donor prospect list somewhere we're supposed to be adding to, or is this just our own? And then also the private foundation grants, is there somewhere we can be looking at those and we're adding to it?
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with you one-on-one, Kristen, and get you those resources. I don't have access to sharing with the full group, so a lot of that happens through the Department of State Lands or Lisa. So I can certainly follow up with you and just get you those resources. I did develop those. They're just Google spreadsheets at this point. But I haven't gotten any names back from anyone. Mention that. And yeah, Laura, I would be happy to work with you and anyone else, Karina, if you're interested in framing what it is that the ask is. The general support was just what we had identified earlier, and I think it is a stronger ask if we can be a little bit more about, why this and why this helps us, more than just turn the lights on. So yeah, totally looking forward to exploring all that and growing that with you all here in the months ahead.
And just to clarify, any board communication goes from DSL to all of you.
Mm-hmm.
My only communication is less than a quorum
Yeah,
with each of you.
thank you for
We're gonna have another minute or so on this, and then we are gonna take a short break and come back just a little bit after our regular schedule with Brian Rogers. But before we do,
Well, in addition to this, I like the idea of targeting the purpose for the fundraising to leverage additional funds. But there also may be people out there who would like to be thinking that their work is their money is going directly to fund some science. So maybe if we had a couple of projects in line that we're going to be trying to fund, then we can say, your money could go to, whales or
sites,
kelp or whatever.
and sonar, multi-beam sonar.
I know.
Yeah,
So
and we have had some, even back before this current incarnation of the board, we did have a one pager with like 3 kind of like tangible projects that were there, that kind of spanned like gear research, which was more socioeconomic, and then something that was a little bit more tethered to ecosystems. I think it was kelp urchin interactions and then general capacity. So something like that is probably a good idea. Thank you, Shannon and Corey, for help leading us in our communications. It's been exciting seeing the pieces that have come together over the time we've been working with you. So we'll keep.
anybody whose cameras are turned on.
Oh, okay.
There's Brian.
There's Brian. Hi. Excellent.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, and thank you for your patience as we are, I think it was like our introduction set us behind this morning. It was just like right out of the gate. But thank you, Brian, for being here with us. I think we'll still have plenty of time for a robust discussion. I'm super excited about this, Brian, and I spent a short amount of time with Lisa on the phone just to prep this, and we're going to find a lot of relevant touch points here with his story. Without further ado, Brian, I'd love just to turn it over to you to just kind of maybe discuss some of the same conversation we were having last week about your entity, how you're set up, what some of the challenges are that you're having, and where you're headed.
Sure. I was wondering if I could, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. I was wondering if I could share my screen and just give a few slides to kind of give a context and a little visual. Is that okay?
Yep, you've got something coming your way that says you're the presenter.
Yes. Fabulous.
We can see it.
You can see it. Okay. And so, yeah, good afternoon. I'm Brian Rogers. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Arts Commission and Oregon Cultural Trust. And they're 2 separate agencies, and we're housed within Business Oregon, the state's economic development department. And Business Oregon is about a $2 billion agency in a biennium. It does a lot of infrastructure support across the state, job creation, retention, and actually manages the state's broadband office. The portfolio for Business Oregon is pretty broad. And actually, hello, Representative Gomberg. Representative Gomberg is very familiar with Business Oregon, the Trust, and the Arts Commission. So a little bit about our structure and authorizers. The Arts Commission was created in 1967, and we moved into Business Oregon in 1993. There are 9 commissioners, and every state in the country has an Arts Commission or Arts Council of some sort or another. The Oregon Cultural Trust, created in 2001 and was housed at the Secretary of State's office for about a year, and then moved in a year later to be, quote unquote, a sister agency with the Oregon Arts Commission. At that time, because the trust was brand new, it needed a lot of infrastructure and capacity building to raise money and to make grants. The trust has 9 board members and 2 legislative ex officio members, and the tax credit that we have is unique. No other state in the nation has a statewide tax credit, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. And you can see our 2 missions. The mission for the Arts Commission is to, provide quality of life for Oregonians through the arts by stimulating creativity, leadership, and economic vitality. And the trust, cultivating, growing, and valuing culture as an integral part of communities. And they're similar. They're kind of similar missions. And to be frank, in the past, it has caused some confusion. And we're in a process now where we are addressing that. I'll get to that in a second. So the outer ring here describes like state government. There's a legislature, the governor's office, our Oregon revised statute. There are admin rules that we have, and we also, follow what DAS, Secretary of State, and Department of Justice provide as guidance to us. Then the inner circle becomes Business Oregon, and then the Arts Commission and Cultural Trust are within that. So that's kind of the arena that we operate under. So a little bit more about our government structure. The Arts Commission on the left-hand side, we're responsible to our board and also federal regulations. We do receive money from the National Endowment for the Arts and our administrative rules. The Cultural Trust has the Cultural Trust Board and admin rules. We also have shared structure around admin rules, Business Oregon Commission, the Director of Business Oregon, the state's Chief Financial Office. There are other fund restrictions and, of course, Oregon revised statute. For the biennium, here's a look at some of the distinct things about the Arts Commission in the lower left. We have commission meetings, contractors. We have 4 full-time FTE. The Cultural Trust, we have board meetings, contractors. We have 3 distinct FTE. There's a lot that goes into our marketing and communication to talk about the tax credit. And then we also share a number of things with Business Oregon. We use their auditing, contracting, fiscal office, human resources, technology. We lease space in conjunction with Business Oregon. And then we also share 3 people between the Trust and the Arts Commission, myself, the communication director, and the senior program manager. So a little bit about the staff. So at the very top is the Director of Business Oregon, the 2 boards on either side, myself, and this kind of tan color are shared people. So we have a communications senior program manager, and currently our grants manager. And then we have program distinct people for the Arts Commission and the Cultural Trust. A little bit about our budget. So most of the funding for both the Arts Commission and Trust, these other funds, a little over $10 million. We also receive federal funds from the National Endowment for the Arts and general fund from the from the legislature, 4.8 million for the biennium. And a breakdown of our revenue, just to kind of get a sense of it. The Oregon Cultural Trust, the tax credit is unique in the country. We raise in the order of about 5.5 million each year, about 10.5 million for the biennium from donations. So the way it works is an individual taxpayer can donate to a cultural nonprofit, and we have about 1,600 registered cultural nonprofits. For example, the Newport Performing Arts Center, the Lincoln City Cultural Center, they're registered nonprofits. So if you gave them a donation of, let's say, $100, you can also match that with a donation to the Cultural Trust for $400. The donation to the Cultural Trust is a 100% state tax credit. You can claim that on your state taxes, and either your refund will go up by $100 or your liability goes down by $100. And we have about 11,000 donors to the Cultural Trust annually. We spend a lot of effort to make sure that people remember to donate to the trust and to bring in new members. And the Cultural Trust also has a permanent fund, quote unquote, an endowment. Just about $42 million that we've built over 20 years. And we put about half the money that we raise each year back into the permanent fund. The interest earnings and investments come back to the trust, which we reinvest in our grant-making programs. Our expenses, we have a pretty large portfolio of grant-making programs for both the Arts Commission and Cultural Trust. We reach, every county across the state. Just about every community receives a grant. We also have programs and services. We manage the state's Percent Art program, which puts public art with state-owned buildings. And we do a lot of, marketing and promotion of what we do. So yeah, I'll pause there and also let you know that we're, both boards have a joint committee, 3 members of each board, along with the governor's office and the legislative affairs person at Business Oregon. And what we are doing is exploring the potential of becoming semi-independent state agency, much like Travel Oregon or the Oregon Film and Video Office. I started off by saying that we're part of Business Oregon, which is a big department. It has, again, $2 billion agency budget and a lot of programs and services. We enjoy our relationship with Business Oregon, and they enjoy having us. It's a very good relationship. However, as you can see by the amount of grant programs and the funds that we raise from donors, there's a lot of process involved in being part of Business Oregon. And our staff is a relatively, the ratio of staff to programs and services is pretty low, meaning that we're trying to do as much as we can with as little as we have. And Business Oregon and the governor's office recognize that we can be a lot more flexible, nimble, quicker if we were semi-independent. So, we make a lot of smaller impact awards, typically under $20,000. We make probably 600 to 800 grants a year, whereas Business Oregon might make, a $3 million grant for a water treatment facility and manage that contract. So it's kind of a different setup than the rest of Business Oregon. The other thing, too, that the boards are exploring is a combined governance structure. Whether the boards can combine and manage the portfolio grant-making program and revenue sources. And they just met Monday and Tuesday to kind of work through what both of those might look like. And we're actually using Oregon Consensus, which is attached with Oregon Solutions at Portland State University. And Oregon Consensus is guiding us through the process. They're doing a great job facilitating and helping us think about a lot of different things. We're doing a lot of research about different kinds of semi-independent agencies and really doing some deep thinking about how the two boards might work together, become one, while maintaining what's important. So how about I pause there and see if there's any questions, thoughts, reactions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. You can see why I was intrigued. There's a lot of parallels here and some clear differences. Yeah, I'd love to hear from our board members and Representative Gomberg what is coming up for y'all. Yeah, go ahead, Karina.
Several things. I mean, it's very the idea of a shared sort of a structure that has the elements of an independent, but also they remain connected to the state sounds very interesting. I'd like to look forward to hearing more about how that conversation evolves, what might be possible there, because there are advantages to both types of organizations and actually potentially more powerful together than either one or the other model. So very interested in that. The tax credit obviously is very interesting, given that we're trying to raise funds and to benefit, Oregon and Oregon resources. It seems like it could be a good match. And it would certainly be a powerful incentive for fundraising. So kind of interested in how that.
Brian, did you mention there's a limit on that tax credit amount? Forgive me if you said it already, but can you say again?
Yes, the limit is $500 for an individual, and a couple filing jointly is $1,000, and then corporations it's $2,500.
So, I mean, these are like almost micro donation levels, not quite micro, but really quite small. But you're talking about 11,000 individuals. You have a large marketing budget I don't know if it's large, but a substantial marketing budget of $1.5 million a biennium to get that word out there and promote the arts and culture and the programs. You said it's the only one in the nation for arts? Is that what you said?
Yes, it's the only statewide tax credit in the country, statewide. There are some regional ones, and I can't remember what cities or municipalities have them. But yes, and in fact, our marketing budget, very early on in the cultural trust development, it was clear that we needed, to spend money on marketing and promotion to get the word out. And that's when the cultural trust license plate was developed. And the revenue from that is used to market and promote the tax credit. A lot of people forget to donate. That's like the number one reason. It's like we lose 500 donors roughly a year because life changes. They move out of state. They're no longer, they no longer submit state taxes, or things happen. And we also try to bring in new people, new funders, new donors.
Is this a tax credit an option for us to pursue even? I mean, it's an intriguing model, but I don't know if it's what it would take for us to even consider that.
My guess is it's not easy or everyone would be doing it. But I don't know the answer to that question. Representative, can you give us some insight maybe?
Well, Brian, I'm just trying to recall the tax credit donation program generates about 10 million a year for the trust. Is that correct?
About 10 million a biennium. Yeah,
All right.
about
So
about 5.5 a year. Yes.
about 5.5 a year. That is because it's a credit and it comes after your taxes. What we're doing is we're going to the legislature and asking them essentially to commit $5 million a year, $10 million a biennium of lost revenue to the trust. I mean, this is not free money as such. If you have a tax credit, it means it's a reduction in revenue that the state receives. So that's what we're trying to sell, is a reduction in revenue as opposed to an outright commitment of funds. At the end of the day, the effect on the bottom line is the same.
And the architects, I wasn't around at the time, the architects of the Cultural Trust were hopeful that it was written in the statute that proceeds from the sale of a tract of land in Salem, the Mill Creek property, would generate close to $100 million, which would go, half the funding would go to the Cultural Trust, the other half would go to Oregon Correctional Enterprises. And the $100 million that the Cultural Trust would receive would essentially build up the endowment, the permanent fund, in which the trust would mostly make awards from the interest and investment earnings from that. The Mill Creek property, there has been some proceeds. I think about $3.5 million over 20 years. It's the recession hit, the properties didn't sell as quickly as everyone had hoped. So there are some original things that were set up, and I can send you the link of the document that kind of the architects had put together.
Question about the tax credit from your perspective, Brian. Does it motivate, there's a limit on it. I understand in the cumulative, it's a cost to the state revenue. But does it motivate larger donations? Like, is it a sort of an entry way point for private donations that are beyond what the tax credit gives? Is there overlap in your donors and your tax credit getters, I guess?
Is there, can you say that
Major
again?
donors. I'm just wondering if the tax credit motivates larger donations later, like it's an entry point for more major donors.
Oh, I think it could. We haven't really tracked that. We estimate that there are about 250,000 donations made to cultural organizations a year, and 5% of those donations, those people donate to the Cultural Trust. So there's a small percentage of the donation world out there that actually participate in the Cultural Trust. We do receive donations over the tax limit. There are a number. We've received $5,000 donations, 10,000, and we also have received benevolent gifts of a couple 100,000 occasionally. People leave the funds in their will to us.
Thanks. I was just curious.
Well, I can say as when I learned about this, it certainly motivated me to look around for other opportunities of cultural activities in my community. So I found it to be an amplifying opportunity. I really liked that this program was there. So, I mean, I think that was probably the intent, and it worked on me without having to, twist my arm.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the Cultural Trust, I mean, you said 2001, 2002 was about the inception of it, but at least in my view, it has really good visibility. because as you said, you're in every community and you're making multiple small contributions in each community. So you really are, and then the license plate and so forth just kind of adds to that. That would be a real big difference that we have with the Ocean Science Trust, that one, it's just hard to get ocean awareness when you're not on the coast generally, and even here at the coast, sometimes we just, it's like, oh, that thing that's there. So that would take time and effort on our part. Yeah, there's so much envy I'm feeling, when I think of like, wow, to have access to grant making like that would be fantastic. But as Representative Gomberg said, it's not free money and it wouldn't be an easy thing to pursue in terms of tax credit. But even outside of that model, there are a lot of things I think that could be learned from this. Just like one of the things we've talked about outside of fundraising is just our structure and where we nest in or out of the state government ecosystem. So I wouldn't mind exploring that a little bit more with you, Brian. And I know that this is an ongoing conversation, but like, what would you, you said there's kind of some risks and rewards to some of these different scenarios. Are there what are some of the bigger risks and rewards in terms of becoming semi-independent state agency, and also just if you've considered just becoming an independent nonprofit, 501c3, and what that conversation has looked like?
Yeah, and balancing the risks and rewards of being like a semi-independent, we do lose a lot of support from Business Oregon, which would have to be figured out. And if we do it, if it does happen, and it's got to go through legislative review, of course, and input. We would have to figure out the most economical way to provide the back office, the HR, the IT. We could contract with DAS. We could contract with, private entities, and looking at that cost. And, the reward side of it, one of the highlights would be flexibility, being able to do things a little quicker, a little easier. And in talking with folks at Oregon Film, they have all the guide rails set up, but within that, they could do things in a more economical, efficient way.
I'm curious about this whole idea of a semi-independent state agency, irregardless of the tax credit. So like an organization like Travel Oregon, they do receive general fund, right? Don't all of the semi-independent, or the ones that exist in Oregon, semi-independent state agencies, aren't they receiving some type of general fund budget biennially?
I'm hard pressed to find a good example of a semi-independent receiving general fund.
Like commodity commissions.
Yeah, Oregon Film is with lottery funds, and Travel Oregon is mostly funded by percentage of tax, hotel room tax, lodging tax.
Got it.
I think they are eligible to receive general funds, but because of the lodging tax, they focus on that. That's what I've been told. I have to do the research. I don't know if Representative Gomberg has any more experience, thoughts.
Well, the answer is always it depends. If you've seen one state agency, you've seen one state agency, right? But I thought Travel Oregon was part of Business Oregon as well.
I think back in the day they used to be, but they are semi-independent nowadays. And there's a couple other, most of the semi-independent agencies, like Oregon, the Wine Board, they operate on basically a tax on every ton of grapes shipped, or something like that. It's like $20, $30 for every ton.
$25 per ton and that gets complicated on collecting that tax. Half of it's paid by the vineyard, and half of it's paid by the folks who make those grapes into wine. So if we're shipping grapes out of state, it's hard to collect the tax from those people. But we digress.
Is that the same as the general agricultural commodity commissions, which there are 30 plus, or is that a different structure than a semi-independent? Because those live under Department of Agriculture, and they do not receive general fund. They're funded on landings taxes.
I'm not familiar with them.
Okay.
In fact, for travel or Oregon Film and Video, they actually Business Oregon passes through the lottery funds for their administration through Business Oregon to Oregon Film, and it's dispersed on a quarterly basis.
There's a program in Business Oregon called the Tide Gates Program. They provide funding for planning projects for the development and construction of tide gate infrastructure on the coast. That's kind of interesting. Maybe we just need to explore some of these other models within the business.
I'm kind of curious to kind of wrap this back around from the OOS perspective, like why we're having this conversation in the first place. What problem are we trying to solve with thinking about our structure? And I think one of the drivers, maybe there's multiple things that contribute to this conversation, but it's this idea that when we're successful, we will be administering a lot of money. And I think as Brian was saying, they administer thousands of small grants. We'd probably be administering dozens of medium-sized grants a year. And also that administrative burden that comes with that and what that does to our agency, our parent agency is one of the reasons why we have to consider this. An approach is do nothing and stay where we are, but bring more financial resources to the department to help to staff what the needs are of this organization, and whether we stay as this kind of nebulous body or become an official project of, or actually like kind of the extreme flip of that is a completely independent 501c3, which a lot of people would say, why don't you just do that and be more flexible, right? You have flexibility, you can receive funding directly, you can apply without having to get permission all the time and all this stuff. But losing that really close touch point with the state, in my opinion, one of the risks of that is credibility and connection and so forth. So I just kind of am bringing us back to kind of, the starting point of this conversation, wondering if that opens up any more thoughts with the board or Brian as we negotiate forward here.
Yeah, I think, the benefits of being a state agency or even semi-independent state agencies, you do have that kind of, visibility, authority to some degree, and, the accountability to state government, the governor's office, the legislature, it's all kind of baked into it. That said, there are very successful statewide nonprofits, 501c3s that or regional that operate you know, at a very high level.
I mean, I guess my general gut feeling is I do think we need to come up with another model that we don't stay housed in DSL forever. I don't think that's good fit for either of us for the longer term. I agree with you, Laura, though, that I would hate to completely separate from the state. I think there are benefits to being at least some sort of formal relationship with the state. So whether it's a semi-independent agency, or maybe there's a better fit under a different organization. I mean, maybe something like business, or like maybe, I think for DSL, DSL's too bureaucratic and clunky, and we're too much of a burden for that. Like, doesn't seem like a great fit for the long term, is my gut feeling. But I don't have any other clear path forward at this point, just exploring.
What would be some examples, anyone, and Brian, you brought it up, of independent 501c3s that really do a good job of staying close to the state, or, you know, holding that kind of relationship in balance, just as we're exploring models and talking to people?
Yeah, I think in sort of, you know, our world of arts and culture, you know, Oregon Humanities is a good example. They, you know, receive national humanities funding. They receive funding from us to provide statewide services. They do a great job in programming all across the state. You know, Oregon Folklife Network, they're actually, Oregon Humanities is a nonprofit. Oregon Folklife Network is housed at the U of O, and they provide services all across the state, and you know, work with a lot of traditional artists and you know, just about every tribe. There's challenges. It's a whole different set of challenges being a department or attached to a university or a college. It's like state government, but different in a lot of respects.
More expensive?
Yeah, there's the indirect cost transfer. So if you receive a grant, the university or college is eligible to take 30% or whatever it is, indirect cost transfer. You know, actually, you might want to have a conversation with Oregon Consensus. You know, they're part of PSU. They're, I believe, subsidized in part by the state to provide, you know, great services at a good cost. And they're actually going through a very similar kind of conversation about, you know, they have very, you know, with Oregon Solutions, Oregon Consensus, they're very closely tied, but they are separate. There are some places where they intersect, and they're kind of exploring what that means as well. And they have a lot of background and knowledge about how state government works and what it does. And, you know, there's not a lot of, you know, you don't need to give them a lot of background. They get caught up to speed pretty darn quick.
So Brian, under Business Oregon, if people do want to make a direct tax deductible contribution to the trust or to the Arts Commission, how does that mechanism work?
It's pretty simple and easy. You know, on our website we have the donate online, and then we also receive a lot of checks. A lot of our donors are of the age where they like to write checks, and people can also donate over the phone. We also receive some stock donations and, as I mentioned, Benevity gifts. So there's a variety of ways that people can donate.
I might be missing something then, because I'm thinking they need to be giving to a 501c3 in order to have a charitable donation. That's why we have our relationship with the Oregon Community Foundation outside of the state treasury. So did I miss something there that you have a pathway for that?
Yes, that's the first step. They have to make a donation to a cultural organization, a nonprofit, and then they are eligible for the tax credit.
Right. But they can also just write a check to the Oregon Cultural Trust and it goes into the treasury.
Yes,
Sorry.
we deposit funds or transfer to Treasury.
Okay.
Well, Department of Revenue first, and then they transfer to Treasury.
And those are deductible as well?
Oh, that's the same thing. That's sort of the sequence of it. We receive the funding from the donor. We send it to Department of Revenue. They verify, and then it's deposited into our Treasury accounts.
And they can deduct that?
Yes, there's actually, like, when you fill out your taxes, and like if you're doing it on on one of the software platforms. God, why am I blanking on the name?
TurboTax.
TurboTax. When you're going through TurboTax, you type in your donations that you make, even if you're not eligible for, even if you're taking the standard deduction to cultural organizations. And there's at the end, when you're almost at the end of the TurboTax, there's a place where there's roughly a dozen or so tax credits. Yeah, there's a dozen or so state tax credits, and you could just put in the cultural trust in the amount that you donate to us. As soon as you put in TurboTax for $100 or whatever the case may be, it automatically increases
Always getting treated as a tax credit. All donations are getting treated as a tax credit. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Keith, want to make sure we're not missing your thumbs up. You're good. You're liking this. Okay. Very good.
At this point, are we able to receive donations and offer a tax? If someone wants to donate to OOST, is that tax deductible?
Yeah. So if they wrote us a check and we deposited it straight into the treasury, no. So if they write Oregon Community Foundation a check to put into our account there, then yes.
But we have limitations in terms of how we can then spend those dollars from the Oregon Community Foundation.
Which are real limitations. Like, we can't pay a contractor. We have to pay other nonprofits, state agencies, universities, tribes, but you can't pay individuals. So that's a big limitation when you're doing contract work with contractors.
So that also segues back to the previous conversation about how do we structure our ask for private donations, about how we describe how those funds could be used.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's obvious, but to me, I need to be reminded of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's important.
I mean, I'm going to bring up Sea Grant again, just because we do a lot of this kind of work. And I know that, you're mentioning the university indirect recovery, but there are lots of times when we get grants from foundations that have a cap, and that's all we can take then. And so there are ways to structure things. We also work with other foundations. So we work with the Agricultural Research Foundation, and we work with the Oregon Community Foundation sometimes, and our university. So there are mechanisms for addressing that potential limitation or downside, or mitigating it to some extent, but still getting the benefit. Like, we do this all the time. make grants and work with contractors.
Yeah, so there's like
Yeah.
systems and
There's like a
infrastructure
system in place.
Yeah.
Medium-sized grants is kind of our business area, so I'm just saying, like, there are some possibilities there, essentially, to explore also.
Unless we're getting a lot of federal money, that might, because I don't think there's any exceptions for federal rate.
No.
Yeah.
No, but for
But
the stuff that they're
yeah.
doing, I'm just saying, there might be some portion that would be useful.
That is, I mean, that is something that's appealing.
Yeah.
It's like there is infrastructure and systems in place, not having to, like for our own 501c3, you have to do like settle all that stuff.
Yeah.
It would require staff.
Yeah.
Because like California is a 501, California Ocean Science Trust is set
Oh,
up as a
they are.
501c3.
And they have
And there's
trouble
a lot
sometimes
of
getting
them.
money from, I mean, they can get from the legislature, but they can't get it, like, across agencies as far.
Okay.
They're working on that.
And just the administrative support required to run that is significant. All right, well, good conversations. Are there other thoughts, questions for Brian? We're way ahead of schedule now.
That was very helpful. I really appreciated that info.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, and most causes like the one you're working on, donations to it from an individual are probably eligible for a deduction. So someone can deduct the amount given to you on their taxes. So you might want to check on the IRS website, and maybe if you know a tax advisor, check in about that.
So Brian, you're saying that's true even if those monies don't go through the Oregon Community Foundation? On our
Yeah, I
behalf?
would explore that.
Okay.
that. So donations to you are donated to the Community Foundation, OCF.
Or they can go directly to the treasurer.
The state, sure.
Yeah. So charitable contributions go to Oregon Community Foundation, totally tax deductible, no questions asked. If we get a federal appropriation or a legislative appropriation, or if it's a foundation that doesn't really care because they're a foundation, then it can go straight into the treasury. But if me, Laura Anderson, wants to write a $1,000 check to the treasury, my understanding is that's not tax deductible. But we shall explore that because it sounds like that's worth looking into.
Yeah, I mean, if they write it directly to you, your organization, then you might be able. That might be deductible.
Okay.
If you're saying the OCF has, guidelines about how you can expend funding, and you want to do something very specific with a consultant or whatever, or contractor, you may be able to accept those funds directly, and the person who donated those may be able to claim it on their taxes.
Okay, well, we'll definitely ask the question for
Okay.
sure. Well, best to you as you continue to consider how your organization is going to be structured, and maybe we'll check back and see how things are going next year.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, take care. Bye.
All right.
We're back on schedule.
We sure are.
Chair Anderson?
All right, so thank you, Luli, for coming to us. I think you're going to be giving us a presentation just on the results of your work since the Nearshore Data Needs Assessment was completed, and talk about future data needs and resources with our board. So looking forward to it.
Great, thank you so much, and happy to begin a few minutes ahead of schedule here. So thanks to the council for having me here to present. And on behalf of OCOIN, I also want to thank Oregon Sea Grant for the ongoing support in this work. My name is Luli. I'm currently based in Corvallis, and I've been working as a fellow supporting Oregon Sea Grant Summer Scholars and the work of OCOIN this last year. Today, I'll be giving a progress update on OCOIN in alignment with the findings of OOST Nearshore Data Needs Assessment. I'll outline major takeaways from the OOST report, how they've guided OCOIN's initiatives, and future considerations for data sharing needs in Oregon in general. OCOIN was preceded by state recognition of the importance of centralized data sharing location, or a centralized data sharing location for research collaboration and data discoverability. Namely, in 2010, the Oregon Task Force on Nearshore Research recommended the need for a coordinated data management system, highlighting the availability of localized information from a variety of sources as important for coastal decision making. The slide here is a snapshot of a timeline of projects that had this similar intention. OCOIN emerged as a response to the need for this centralized research discovery location and has been working to fill it since. The network initiated out of a project in Elise Granick's lab, conducting interviews with decision makers on data gaps and management issues. They found that sustained coordination was needed between those producing data and those using it to guide research and fill data gaps. Launched in 2017, the Coastal Research Explorer, which is an ArcGIS platform, became OCOIN's online presence for research discoverability. This tool is still used and is updated today with over 175 entries and remains one of the main products of OCOIN. The picture on the right here shows the locations of these entries that are uploaded from data producers themselves. This is crowdsourced, showing the interest in research visibility and impact through this tool. The tool is sorted into marine reserves, OAH, human dimensions, making the focus on access to coastal salient topics. The network also materialized as a human network events, newsletters, research highlights, focusing on the human-driven side of collaboration. And OCOIN functions predominantly as a volunteer-run organization. Many who began this network, Andy Lanier, who I believe is in the room today, Tanya Haddad, Elise Granick, have stayed on to guide the mission forward and then lead Oregon Sea Grant Summer Scholars in encouraging new entries into the Coastal Research Explorer. The web presence of OCOIN has been limited as the CRE has lived on the Institute for Natural Resources Oregon Explorer's digital library, and OCOIN linked to OCM, or Oregon Coastal Management Program's Coastal Directory, yet both remain as active tools. So in 2023, OOST issued a data needs assessment. The findings were similar to the ones that initiated OCOIN. A centralized location for finding data is needed to be responsive to the difficulty of accessing and finding information and filling data gaps. The assessment was looking into an open ocean data portal in Oregon. Being that OCOIN was created to fill this gap and functioning with limited resources, this report also provided extremely valuable insight to the current landscape and recommendations for OCOIN to be responsive. Some major takeaways is that there is crowded data sharing. There are too many places to look. There's lack of clarity what the differences between different networks are. And recommendations of successful networks that are currently used are general user friendliness and accessibility, interconnectivity between these networks, so drawing connections as to what the different niches are, trust and familiarity in these networks, the importance of quality control in data sharing, presence of robust metadata, attention to open data standards and indigenous data sovereignty, being both fair and care. And the sentiment resonates that, excuse me, people need to make what exists more robust and interconnected, acknowledging that leveraging existing platforms can alleviate redundancy. So in the last year, I've worked alongside the OCOIN steering committee to address some of these bottlenecks, factoring into the lack of accessibility of this network and increasing visibility. We collated goals and have been working off of this strategic plan. The first goal is to clarify OCOIN's niche within these networks and build connections where natural to. So emphasizing OCOIN's goal is data access in general, not only the CRE, bolstering interconnectivity where appropriate, addressing research backlog. I have a list of research to upload with consent from current PIs. We have gained 20 entries this year, I believe. The third was establishing OCOIN's online presence with the goal for OCOIN to generally become more accessible, addressing that different tools have been housed in disparate locations, so making OCOIN more user-friendly, triggers a feedback loop of the buy-in, and more entries triggers more entries. So I will jump to OCOIN's website here to show the rest of the initiatives that are being put into place. So I worked along 2 summer scholars and brought together content for this OCOIN website, providing a clear overview of OCOIN's mission, main tools, how to get involved, providing context on OCOIN's background, different initiatives that led to its creation, who comprise OCOIN, and clearly leading users to the Coastal Research Explorer. We also emphasized the people side of OCOIN through a research calendar, research highlights. This year was Dr. Lee Torres, and network events. We're also working on a visual aid of other data sources to unite different sources together and make them more accessible and contextualized for users, addressing the want for interconnectivity. And very important in this space, OCOIN is working to integrate good data practices into this work by uplifting fair and care principle into the tools and resources it promotes. By attention to these, future OCOIN staff and network members can find information on how to promote information that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and repeatable, and how to care, to promote information, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethical, being that traditional ecological knowledge should be important to coastal decisions, and the infrastructure of data networks should be ready to support ethical access to data. So we've been working on this resource page on fair and care resources, centering these for future OCOIN leadership and data stewards. So with this website, let's see here. OCOIN is better equipped to have a presence at research and community events like State of the Coast, research summits, presentations to the Tribal Caucus, spread awareness of how to use and add to the CRE as an easy to use, more accessible platform. We are, with a more accessible platform, OCOIN is gaining momentum as a network in these goals, consolidating resources, and holding and beginning new partnerships and planning outreach events, which comes to my final takeaway, that OCOIN has potential to be significant to data discovery in Oregon and was formed to be the central location, both in an online portal for discovery and human network, but there is no long-term funding. OCOIN functions in a underfunded space where the human element is important and yet hard to come by. And so it's become clear that not only to carry this project forward and the buy-in from all who have put their research and support into the network, but to also enhance it to increase trust and access and usability of these tools and research in general. OCOIN needs dedicated staff, and with dedicated staff, more than just one part-time fellow, we can be more responsive to the needs of OOST Nearshore Data Needs Assessment. I do want to say we've been really, really grateful and appreciative of Oregon Sea Grant for the support that they have provided as an extra support for from Oregon Sea Grant to continue the work of OCOIN this year. Oregon Sea Grant has been a natural home for OCOIN scholars working in research impact and access, and has been instrumental to the successes of research access and network events. So as a OCOIN steering committee, we have identified that one long-term staff member, either in the form of a grad level fellow or one full-time staff, is important to continue these initiatives. And so as we are writing future plans for OCOIN, I come to OOST exploring pathways to support this network and continue the momentum and working in response to the needs found by your issued report. There are a few pathways that we have thought for future funding, but bringing this now to OOST, asking for advice, as in seeing it important, the dedicated personnel to continuing the work of OCOIN. So I want to thank you so much for your time, for supporting coastal research and stewardship, providing the Nearshore Data Needs Assessment, which continues to guide OCOIN, and Andy for being here on behalf of OCOIN and to help answer any questions. And I'd also like to open it right now before questions to Andy, if there's anything to clarify here as a longtime OCOIN leader. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, Lily. I'll just ask the board if they have questions.
Are there other data compilation sharing sources for Oregon ocean data? I know there have been efforts, as was mentioned, but ongoing now, are there any others that are extant?
Yes, and actually Lily flashed through a concept map that has those organizations identified and broadly characterized. So there are some, but there are gaps based upon theme and type of information that are stored. So one example is our Coastal Management Program archives GIS information and serves as a hub of statewide GIS information. But a lot of the information that's produced through projects that are funded by OOST or by the state are in many other file format types. And so many of those are not well organized, archived, and available.
And so I'm sorry to, I'm new to this. So OCOIN's idea is just to fill those gaps, to provide a home or at least an access point to those other kinds of data.
So I think the reason that OCOIN was established was to fill the gap in nearshore research project coordination of ongoing and planned research. And it does that, as Lily mentioned, through project principal investigators entering their information into a simple web form that has a geospatial element to it, as well as metadata from the project level. But it is not a data storage solution for the information that's generated by those projects. And that's the gap that needs to be filled.
So it's like a metadata catalog.
Yeah.
Specific to Oregon and Oregon Nearshore, which has value in and of itself. But as you said, there's this, there's this gap of like where to store the data, or, because there are certain catalogs that have the data, like the GIS data, even, you could go to NSF and probably catalog the Oregon specific or, research projects and get access to them through their data storage portals. But there are some projects that don't have those natural homes.
Mm-hmm. So at a minimum, should we be requiring any grants that we support to provide that metadata and information to OCOIN? Just like we say, you need to have an outreach component that has this, this, and this. Because we don't do that right now in our contracts.
I think we have been striving to reach out to a lot of those PIs and get them to enter their data involuntarily.
do that.
We
But-
can make
But I do think that that would be an important mechanism and would be a continued development of this system. Right? The system is only as good as the data that goes into it and is useful,
I
right?
believe Sea Grant encourages it in their grants, but doesn't require.
Sea Grant has language in the award letters that that encourages uploading to the Coastal Research Explorer, and we've been working on different levels of partnership with research offices or individual labs that when new funding comes in to have language about increasing research impact through the Coastal Research Explorer. But right now, Sea Grant is the only one that does have language about OCOIN.
And it's not required, it's just encouraged.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, maybe just at least encouraging. I think there's probably still some issues if you make it a really hard, you have to. I think some human dimensions data is like human subject sensitivity, and if there's any traditional knowledge from tribes, it could still be problematic. And so an absolute hard requirement might not be quite there yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
Andy,
I think the level of information we're providing through the form would not get to anything sensitive. It
Okay.
really is just discovering what the project is.
okay, so
Like,
like
with
maybe
the
that's
principal-
not
Not the
To
data, it's
principal
just the
as
metadata.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you actually
Right.
start
Okay.
thinking about housing or archiving the data that comes from
Right,
those
right,
projects,
okay.
then there's those
I see what you're saying. Yep.
Okay.
criteria
Yeah.
concerns you would need to
Yeah.
be thinking
Good point.
about.
Right, okay, so now I'm getting it a little bit better. I thought there was a data serving aspect, but it's really more like Frank and Sally are doing both work on groundfish and
They may
Go
not
to
know
them.
They exist.
yeah, go and talk to them.
They have
or-
a data set from this year to this year.
Yeah, yeah,
And a lot of the funding that has gone to supporting fellows like Luli has gone to the outreach component of reaching out to researchers to let them know the tool exists, to encourage them to enter their information into the tool. So that's really been where most of the time and energy has been spent. Although the team that was hired this summer, so there were 2 summer scholars and Luli who helped to oversee them and also do other work. They've revamped their entire website. It's not published yet, but it's about to be. So they are continuing to make improvements and providing information that would answer all these questions that we're actually asking and talking about right now.
Can you share the language you guys use in your
Oh,
contract?
yeah, sure. Just
That'd be
follow
great.
up and, yeah, I'll try.
Okay.
Luli, maybe you can help me get it from Sarah and get it to Lisa. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Luli. I'll just say,
I think.
is that a question? Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, a quick question and comment, and thank you, Luli, for the work you're doing, and to Sea Grant for supporting this work. The comment is that, and it's for us and for OCOIN, is that the approach for sharing data, instead of a contractual requirement or any kind of requirement within the grant, I think going the pathway of making it a deliverable is a much softer approach, and it makes more sense from it. I think it's an easier pathway to see that data is shared, and so consider the approach of making it a deliverable. And my question,
But
Luli,
not
to
the
you,
data, but not the data.
The data, I'm sorry, what should be a deliverable? Can you clarify?
the data.
But it has to go live somewhere.
Yes, as a deliverable of the contract.
But I
So
think,
this is
so I think.
it's a very
but I
common
think-
approach. It's a very common approach and a very common within multiple grant sources that as part of the deliverable, the data are delivered and they go to something specified. So that's a softer approach than making it a condition of the grant. It's just part of the scope of work.
I mean, it's
And my
interesting. Oh, go ahead, Keith, sorry.
Yeah, and my question is about tracking use, Luli, and with the website and within the database structure, is there a way for you to track the use over time and by user? And if so, what is that telling you to date about engagement?
Luli, I can take that one if you want me to do it. So the Coastal Atlas server that houses a lot of the infrastructure for the coastal management program is actually the machine that the website lives on. And we can track through Google Analytics general usage. I have not looked at that in quite a while. And actually, where the site is currently living, that would be done through the Institute for Natural Resources, because it's hosted currently on their platform, but they are in the midst of a migration, which is why the group built a new website and is going to be porting it over. So
these are
we could ask, we could ask the Institute for Natural Resources for some of that usage data to give us a sense of pattern of use over time.
And to see with the new launch,
Yeah.
if you start getting a boost,
Yeah, these are two important parts of the return on investment picture and story that you want to tell. Number one, that here are our holdings, and as they grow, and as we characterize what the holdings are, but then who's using them? How are they making the return on investment out into the scientific community or the decision support community? Whenever you're looking for additional funding, those would be the first two questions I would ask. So I think those are just two things to think about, and appreciate your presentation and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And Andy and Karina both had a.
Yeah, just one final thought, and that is I think the work that this group has done has continued to just highlight the fact that we are missing archival and public dissemination of data that may be funded by projects in the state, by projects that Boost is funding, and that is a need. And this Coastal Research Explorer could be a launching off point to leverage the work that's been done to think about how you could actually connect some sort of a data hub to this existing tool and gain the benefits of both needs being addressed through a single kind of focused project.
it takes capacity to do
That is
it.
good. It's going to take
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It seems like there's no perfect solution, but this is what we're working with, and I'm just really grateful to Aucoin and to all of your long-term efforts, Andy, for keeping this going so that we have a place. But I see this in our broader fundraising as it's like our administrative costs. You know, it's one thing to say we're going to fund a project to talk about data modeling, but just to start putting funding towards actually building out what we have and considering an administrative cost, which is to say Aucoin knows we don't have money that we're sitting on that we're holding back from you right now. But as we're building our portfolio moving forward, we should consider this cost of doing business and keep the partnership very much alive. And Karina, I'm sorry, you had your hand up also.
Oh, I was just, the other thing is that as in terms of grant conditions and encouraging a lot of PIs that we fund probably have access to other repositories for data. So it might be an encouragement to please post your data publicly in a publicly accessible permanent repository and
list it.
So
Yeah.
without requiring it, because we don't run any of those, but it might be an encouragement to do so. But start at least you could get the data through the portal.
Well, it's good to have on the radar as we're moving into 2025. I would like to move on to public comment at this point. And Lisa, if you could pop up the chat box, I would ask any members of the public who would like to engage in public comment to type their name into the chat box, and I'll call on you in sequence. We're down in our numbers a little bit.
Yeah, we had 17 on there, but folks
Yeah.
have been popping in and out.
That's all right. That's how it rolls. If we have none, and we only have Karina maybe for a couple of minutes, I would like to, I just want to have a really quick board conversation about queuing us up for success for next year with our meetings. This was a really full agenda, maybe a little bit more than we should try to cram into 3 hours. I'm honestly not crazy about making the meetings longer. I'm a little more interested in just focusing down on what does a board really need to do. My opinions on that are, kind of traditional board responsibilities around setting strategy, making sure we're on track, and making decisions. We balance this with a history that USTA has had of bringing a lot of information to our meetings, learning from scientists, et cetera. I have a couple of thoughts that I'll throw out there and see what the board thinks. One is moving into the next year, maybe we either limit to one like science report presentation so that we have more time to give that person. It feels a little bit too rushed. Another approach would be to just do that once a year and have one of our meetings be just really focused on that and queue up. And maybe it's even a longer meeting. Maybe we do it with lunch or something like that, and we spend a full day. The reason I say this is that I really think we're in a good position to make progress on some of these funding pathways, and I don't want to short us on those conversations and the need for being really strategic about it. So I don't know, what do y'all think about setting us up for 2025? Anyone?
I think either of those, I maybe would lean more towards one meeting where we do an in-depth science and the rest of it is really focused, other meetings
Kind of
more focused on
businessy.
business. But I don't have a strong, but I agree. I think we have a lot to get done. Some heavy
Yeah.
lifting that kind of needs to be done to get more established.
Yeah. Keith?
Yeah, I like the idea, and I'll just call it the kind of the workshop idea too. So in addition to the 4 meetings per year, and the summit, which I think which provides a significant, the most significant opportunity for us to share information, but as a working group, when we're working on board function and strategy, maybe think about the kind of a workshop approach, and maybe that's 1 to 2 a year, and that those are dedicated specifically to the strategy kind of discussions. I'd certainly be amenable to adding a meeting as opposed to lengthening meetings as a general approach. Since we're only meeting 4 times a year, which is manageable for I think most people, that addition of a meeting is a better, at least feels better to me than let's meet for a full day, and just because that can, especially if it's in person, it's okay, and I want to get out to the coast as much as possible, but I'm not always able to do that. And so sitting online for 5 or 6 hours is a more difficult proposition. So just 2 cents.
Yeah, I was thinking that it would be nice to have just a little, maybe it's a in-person or maybe it's a webinar of just the presentations, and it could be more public, involved. It would draw more people and make more attention to the value of the investments, and potentially it could be like a featured event every year, something like that. And then we could ask questions and stuff like that, because I think it feels cramped too. I agree.
Yeah, I think that simplifying the agenda for any given meeting, if it's possible, to focus more time on a topic makes sense, so that we can dig in. But I also know a lot of this is sort of incremental improvements that maybe don't require an hour and a half to just focus on that. So I don't know. I don't know if you're going to be able to have one style to go forward as a structure, but I think you should feel free to modify the structure as you need to provide, make most of a meeting focused on a particular topic when that's really called for.
Mhm, mhm.
And I don't have any objection about whether we lengthen the meeting or we add a meeting. I'm okay either way.
Mhm. All right, good. Just good to get some feedback. I mean, we kind of pull the agendas to, like, we kind of start building the next agenda, like now, actually, but it really isn't until about 4 weeks before that we really nail it. Just remember, our next meeting is virtual only. That's the winter meeting. We just kind of do that because of travel being treacherous for that period of time generally. So, all right, cool. Well, we'll put our heads together with Lisa and think about, I'm always trying to think about how to get new voices into meetings. How do we learn more? How do we, figure out from others what's working and what's not in the state, in the country, in the world. So I'd like to see us maybe looking at more case studies of other states, other sectors like arts or healthcare or whatever, and how they address these kinds of structural issues. All right, meeting's adjourned. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me step
Thanks,
in
Keith.
Lily's presentation.
Do we have a rough idea of when the next meeting